Good evening, friends and family. Welcome to Surf at the Bar this evening. Great to see you. Woohoo! Okay, I got a couple of questions to throw out there tonight. Who has been doing something consistently for 50 years? Is there anyone out there? It has to be legal too. Now who has been doing... Okay, see, you're out. Now who's been doing something consistently for 50 years and is actually the master at it? Dick Brewer. Pretty awesome, right? Just think about that. More than 5 decades at the top of your game and still improving. Not only did Dick Brewer change the way we ride waves with his designs, but he also changed the realm of waves that we can ride. So I would like you to make him feel very welcome, Mr. Dick Brewer. You're on.
Thank you very much.
Take a seat.
Well, it's really wonderful to be here. This is the heart of surfing, and Hawaii will always be the heart of surfing. No matter what anybody does anywhere in the world, it's a Hawaiian sport. And to have been involved in the development of the modern surfboard right from the beginning is what really has been my whole life. And I cut through all kinds of business things and whatnot just to stay on the forefront of surfboard design. And I'm still there.
Join me. I don't want him to stand all night. Welcome, Dick. What an honor to have you here. I'm so excited. Thursday night is just so cool to get to know some of our legends and the talents that are in our community, and you've been a member of this community on and off for such a long time, so excited to have you here. Thank you. Let's start just a little bit ago, like when you were a kid and your dad was an engineer, and you, by the age of 12, actually were running a tool and die cut
Well,
shed.
my dad owned a tool and die company in Southern California after the war, and he had every kind of machine you could ever imagine. Then you know how young kids are surfing. I was that way in a machine shop. And I remember telling these old guys that have been working at it for 50 years, I can do anything you can do better. And I could, at 13 years old. That it's a matter of fact, I could make anything out of steel before I ever built my first surfboard.
So I'm just wondering, because there is a lot of mathematics and just a lot of, I think, it's sort of an internal understanding of angles and planes and surfaces to do that. So do you feel like you were sort of genetically prepared to become the surfboard shaper you became?
Well, the most interesting thing I studied was calculus, and my mind thinks that way. It always has. I got A's in calculus at Long Beach State. And I enjoyed college. I really did enjoy college. Compton Junior College, I was president of the Associated Men's Student. And at Long Beach State College, I was men's senator, which I didn't serve my whole term because I joined the Hawaii Air National Guard and moved to Hawaii. I was going to get drafted, and they gave me a chance, I applied, and I got 99% on one of their AFSC tests, and they said, come on over. We want you in the Hawaii Air National Guard.
Well, pretty amazing too with your, the Air Force, because you're actually building model planes before you were building surfboards.
I was the model airplane I built and designed when I was 15 years old, flying U-control with wires. I got third place in the National Model Airplane Championships with that airplane 2 years later. First, I got third in Dallas, Texas, at Dallas Naval Air Station, and then in Philadelphia also, backed it up.
What did you learn about, fluids and hydrodynamics and aerodynamics and all of that, with planes that you think you could transfer over to your
Well,
boards?
the airflows, the wings that I designed were actually undercambered symmetrical airfoils, which you'll see undercambered airfoils on all modern jets. Um, the thing about the undercamber, you could do ricochet square maneuvers, kind of like bouncing off the lip at 90 miles an hour. My model airplanes would do that. And if I entered a contest to this day, I think I'd still be competitive.
So, at what point did surfing enter your life and surfboard design?
Well, when you're in California, when you turn 16, you get a car. And when you're 20 miles from the beach, you get a car. I got a Ford with a rumble seat so I could put a surfboard in it. And that's what you do in California. You work on hot rods and you go surfing.
How long did it take you to decide you were just going to build your own first board? Was it a slow process? Did you find mentors, or did you just get to it?
Well, I did build myself a gun, a copy of a Joe Quigg that a friend brought over from Hawaii just before I left for Hawaii. Um, and then when I got to Hawaii, immediately I got 5 unemployment checks. I opened a shop in Haleiwa. It's now open, the same place that Louise has the Haleiwa surf shop in right now. And I was selling Dewey Weber boards. Dewey Weber was my good friend. And he fronted me first 20 boards, and then another 20, and then another 20. They were selling well. And I built an 11-footer for Mud Werner, one of the Beach Boys. And one day I was down at the beach, and Buzzy Trent had taken me down there that Castles was breaking 15 feet. And Buzzy yelled, "Brewer, you got to come." So I came down there, and after we'd surfed, we were all standing on the beach with Buffalo and Black and Blue and Watanabe and a few of the other Beach Boys, and Mud came in. We were all watching Mud pass Phil Edwards on a wave on this 11-footer, and when Mud came in, he rode it almost all as far as Duke Hanamoko's ride, and I was standing there next to Buffalo, and Buffalo saw the board, and he goes, "Hey, brah, I'd like one." You don't refuse Buffalo. So I built Buffalo that board, 11-footer, just like Mud's. He won Makaha with it a month later, and that was my first big win. After that, Joey Cabell won Makaha on a Brewer, and Fred Hemmings, and it was all a matter of history after that. Everybody wanted Dick Brewer surfboards Hawaiis. They didn't want Dewey Webers after that.
So, is it true that you held the very first professional or money event at Haleiwa?
That's true. In 1962 and 1963, I held the Haleiwa Surfing Championships. You had to ride a Dick Brewer Surfboards Hawaii board.
Smart.
Butch Van Arsdale won the first contest, and he was offered meals for a day at what's now Joe's. It was a Haleiwa Seaview Inn at that time, and or $500. Butch says, "I'll take the meals." He told me later, he says, "Dick, I'd have starved a few nights if I hadn't had that meal every day at the Seaview Inn."
So, who were your shaping mentors? Because, I mean, you obviously had a lot of talent, but there must have been people that influenced you.
Well, Bob Shepard, who was a fireman who had built boards for years. He was Joe Quigg's student. He was really my teacher when I opened Surfboards Hawaii. And he moved to the Big Island. He doesn't shape. He became a fireman. And he was kind of my mentor, but he was a Joe Quigg second wave shaper.
And your peers, because there were a lot of guys starting to shape boards as well, so you sort of push each other along the way and learn from each other and each other's mistakes, because it's a pretty expensive business having to make a new surfboard every time one doesn't work. So how do you learn off your peers as well?
Well, Mike Diffenderfer, he was there when I started Surfboards Hawaii, and the two of us worked together and actually learned how to shape together. Um, he passed away. A lot of my good friends have passed away. But that's life, and we have to face those things.
I'd love to talk about your Maui days. You had what I believe was called Lahaina Surf Designs, or LSD, which sounds like it would have given way to a very creative time.
Well, Reno and Jerry Lopez and I, we went over to Maui and started a surf shop with Richard Buddy Boy Keohi. And we actually borrowed $5,000 from the gambling syndicate in Lahaina for materials and whatnot. And nobody else would loan us money. And we paid it all back within 6 months.
A good gamble.
It was
for
a
them.
good gamble, and you do pay gamblers.
So what was going on at that time? I mean, I've heard about those early days in Maui. You don't have to actually tell me about the other stuff that was going on, but what was going on with just wave riding, Honolulu, amazing waves that you were breaking open, and what your surfboard designs were allowing guys like Jerry and Reno. Let's hear it for Reno Abalira in the house.
Well, Jerry and Reno and I, we were on the North Shore, and we decided, hey, we need some smoother waves than the big bumpy North Shore waves to really develop our designs. So we went to Honolulu Bay. Where else? And it was with Jerry and Reno that I really put together the first miniguns. And when Reno got second at Puerto Rico on a 6'6" Brewer, um, uh, he was beat by a 9-foot board. It was unbelievable. The judges just weren't ready for what Reno was doing. And surfing's been that way ever since.
And Bob McTavish came through Maui, and that was kind of monumental in the whole downsizing and reshaping of boards too, right?
Well, I remember a lot of things about Maui, but at the end of the Maui scene, we went to Kauai, the three of us, and we rented a little shop in Hanapepe, and really got into building miniguns there in Hanapepe, Kauai. And I remember going surfing in the morning. We'd have to walk a mile down the beach to Picales, and back, and then doing it again just before dark with Lopez and Reno. It really got us in good shape. It really did.
And there was yoga and vegetarianism and all of
The
these
two
things.
of them
going-
turned me on to yoga.
Is that something you've continued through life? Do you think that's...
You know, when I broke my leg, I stopped doing yoga a few years ago, and I wished I hadn't. But I still meditate.
Right, right. Yeah, right. And that was a big part for all of you. And what role do you think that actually played in sort of the surfing performance and what was going on at the time?
Well, your whole spinal alignment has a lot to do with your level of consciousness. And being able to move the spine as well as be able to keep it straight up and down are really important things that yoga and meditation do.
The guys of Reno and Jerry's era, there was a generation even before that, and I wanted to just hear some of the names that you have shaped for over the years leading up even to Reno in the 70s.
Well, Joey Cabell, Buzzy Trent, Peter Cole, virtually almost everybody was riding Brewers back in the early 60s here on the North Shore. And it was a fact. And in fact, Hobie told me one time, he says, first you rode those big waves, and I go, yeah, and he goes, then you built those guns, and I said, yeah, and he goes, we were afraid you're going to take over the surfing world, so we pretended like you didn't exist. And I I said, who's we? And he said, everybody.
I tried to look up the surfer's shaping tree. There's this very elaborate shaping tree which would take up honestly way more and it would not be clear or legible. If I put it on that screen, it's a huge shaping tree that was done a number of years ago, and maybe that tree fell over because there was like one limb that had a ton of people coming off it, and that was you. How do you feel about having sort of inspired and mentored and influenced such a huge generation of shapers?
Well, there's a whole lot of people that have been part of what I was. It's just I was putting together workable combinations through those years of what really worked. And I didn't invent everything. Like Terry Fitzgerald, a lot of people showed up here on the North Shore. Terry was probably one of the best surfers in the world when he showed up, and they wouldn't let him in any contest. So I said, hey, Terry, why don't you come stay with me on Kauai? And he did. But there have been a lot of people that have really influenced me down through the years, and it's a flux. You have to constantly change.
We had Simon Anderson here probably over a year ago now, from Australia, and was famous for his creations in three-fin surfboards back in the early 80s. But you actually made and rode yourself a thruster, a three-fin, or a 2+1 back in 71.
Yes, I was making three fins. They were actually 2+1s. I won the Alamona contest in 1971 on a three-fin surfboard.
And what made you think that three was going to be better than two, better than one?
The twin fins that I was working with David Nuiva when he invented the twin fin, and I felt there was something neutral in the middle between hitting one rail and hitting the other rail where it wasn't quite stable. So I wanted to put a fin in the middle, and I tried all different sizes. Simon is finally the one that put the same fin in the middle. But I was actually at the 2+1, with a larger fin in the middle and smaller ones on the side.
And your own surfing, because I think you're a qualified surfer in your own right at a lot of the North Shore breaks. So your own surfing, how much did that weigh into your trial and error, or was it sort of 50-50 with everyone else?
I was 35 years old when we really went into miniguns, and Jerry and Reno and I, when we went to Kauai, I was the only big wave rider on the North Shore that actually made a transition into short boards. And those guys helped me all the way through it. It was inspiration.
We mentioned McTavish a little bit, and there's always a recurring story that comes up through time just about the shortboard revolution. Can you tell us a little bit just your own insights and experience of that shortboard revolution and the thinking and momentum behind it?
The thing is, you need very little board to actually plane on. That we're riding the tail block, the toe boards that Laird's riding right now are the tail block of Buzzy Trent's 11.3. It's a concave, and finally, when I built Laird that toe board, after Buzzy Kerbox they'd started it here on the North Shore, and in 1962 we had a hurricane on Kauai, and my house lost its roof. And so I rented a house at Backyards right at Phantom's Reef, and Laird came over. His house was damaged, and he stayed downstairs, and Derek Dorner was right across the road, and Buzzy Kerbox ended up buying a Zodiac put a big 60 horse on it, and they started towing. And I was right there, and I remember Laird goes, hey, I got this wave on Maui, it's this giant tube. And I said, hey, well, I've been building these boards for Poto, for Chopo. And he goes, Poto, Chopo, what are you talking about? I said, well, that's Tahiti. And I said, you got to have a full concave and reduce side fins so they don't pull you up the face, and a few other things I mentioned to him. And it didn't make sense to him at the time, so I built the board and left it with Derek Dorner. The next year, the first wave he rode it on was on the cover of that Jaws book. And that was an honest 30-foot wave.
I was going to say, I bet Buzzy and Derek got it. And we'd like to welcome Buzzy Kerbox here tonight. And I would like to make a special mention of Derek Donor as well. These were two guys who were really pivotal in that outer realm of tow-in big wave riding that really erased so much that was going on at the time and took us a giant leap forward. And somehow, someone cast a really big shadow, and a couple of guys sort of didn't get the recognition that I think they deserve.
You know, Derek Dorner, when Simon Anderson first invented the thruster, Derek Dorner and I, we decided, hey, we got some research and development to do to make this thing work on a real gun. We had to move the fins all around and everything, but we pretty much stuck with Simon's fin sizes, and that's when I came up with the modern template that Derek Dorner and I made. I've probably built 4,000 of these guns off that template.
But not this one.
This one right here is an exact copy of Bruce Irons' board that he won the Waimea contest on 3 years ago.
But this one's really special, right?
This is a chambered ball, so it's very collectible. They sell for $10,000 or more. Some of my boards, one of my boards sold for $220,000 at an auction in France. And when that happened, the Wall Street Journal came and they wanted to do a story on Dick Brewer. But I told them, I said, well, I got a couple $100 for shaping that that board.
Well, we're super proud because this board, it was actually just delivered here on Tuesday. It is a beautiful board. As Dick said, it's the one that, the same design shape that Bruce Irons was riding in 2009 when he won the Quicksilver in memory of, or maybe it's 2005, the Quicksilver in memory of Eddie Aikau. And this is actually hanging after tonight on the wall in our new Watershed store with much pride. So thank you.
Thank you very much for buying a Brewer for your store.
Something tells me just getting a board is a deal. So thank you. How did you know? I'm assuming you didn't tow in yourself. Did you tow in? How did you know how to come up with that?
I was a water skier before I was a surfer. And I envisioned that surfboards should look like water skis right from the beginning. And so it was natural just to, when I saw what they were doing, that they needed a water ski.
I asked you when we were chatting once before about, the amount of hours that go into making the boards, and the tow boards are huge too because you actually need, even though they're reduced in size, they're very narrow, they're an incredible looking spear, but they have to be a lot heavier too because the speed and the momentum that you need in order to ride huge waves, you have to make these boards really heavy. So just making one and then improving upon it, making another one, I mean, there are hundreds of hours involved. And I said, how do you progress it? And you said one change at a time.
You learn that building race cars. I raced 427 Ford for the Ford dealer in Honolulu. And we'd make one change on the carburetor at a time, or one change on anything else, gearing or anything else. Don't change two things at once, and otherwise you don't know which change did it.
Which surfers do you think are most in touch, surfers you've worked with, which surfers do you think are most in touch with their equipment and have given you the most valuable feedback?
Gee, I can't really say that right offhand. Probably Reno at his time in history gave me the most feedback.
That's pretty cool. Thanks, Reno. You've worked, as we see here, Andy Irons, Bruce Irons, we've mentioned, Garrett McNamara, Miles Padaka. There are so many surfers who prize your boards. So I'm wondering, not to offend anybody, but do you have your own favorites, people that you think really get it on your equipment?
Um, every board I build is for a purpose, and I learn from every one of those boards when somebody's riding it. I can't say that I have a favorite. There's just little increments of knowledge that I learned every time I build a surfboard.
Jeff Hackman, he was someone pretty important in his time. How did you enjoy your relationship with him?
Jeff Ackman, he was he was riding for me when I went to work for Hobie in 1965. He won the first Duke meet on a Dick Brewer Hobie model. And Jeff Ackman was really influential in putting together the first modern short single fin gun.
And you mentioned Terry Fitzgerald from Australia.